outs in a game. 20.
Swung on and driven to deep left. It is hard. Not far. Yankees win. Yankees win. Bernie Williams homers deep in the left field seat to lead off the 11th inning on a 1-run finish. And the Yankees beat the Orioles 5-4 to win Game 1 of the American League Championship Series. Burn, baby, burn. He's done it again.
Deep left. There it goes. Soaring into history. He's done it. He has done it. 62. Aaron Judge is the American League single-season home run leader. The AL King. Case closed.
What is going on, baseball fans? Jeremy Ladequente here, back at it once again with the state of the franchise. And as we go through this series, you know the drill. From championship glories to rebuilding years, every team has a story. And the story that we're discussing today is that of the Minnesota Twins. And it is my honor to bring our guest from Twins Daily. What's going on, Eric?
Hey, Jeremy. Not a whole lot. Baseball season is here. Spring training games are underway, and this is the best time of the year. Am I right?
100% agree. Without a doubt, best time of the year. So as we kind of get into this series, I always like to take a little bit of a retrospective and kind of get gut reactions into what the 2024 campaign was for the Minnesota Twins.
Man, that is a big question for sure. And I'll tell you, 2024 was the tale of two seasons. So they started out kind of slow, 7-13, but then for the bulk of the season, up until mid-August, they were playing at a 95 win clip. They were seeing some like live game action from top prospects. Things were working, great pitching, good hitting. And then mid-August, bottom fell out. They went 12-27 down the stretch. Brutal ending to the season. Before that happened, they were like 93% to make the playoffs, ended up missing it by 4 games. So if you're looking just by results, it was a brutal season, tough, not a good time to be a fan. But if you're looking at the whole season up until that point, there were a lot of really great moments, things that I think portend well for this season and beyond. Some records were set last year, and we did get to see some of those top prospects. So, overall, injuries just really wrecked the season, and it was a tough way to go out for sure.
No, definitely. There's a lot of guys on that Minnesota Twins team that can really make a very good impact in 2025. Now, but when it comes to looking at this 2025 campaign, Minnesota was not very active on the offseason market. So the only notable moves that were made were 2 trades, one for Mickey Gaspar and the other for Diego Cataya. What kind of, moves can we expect from the Twins going forward? Is there something that could potentially be in the pipeline, or is this kind of where they are?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. So, for fans of the Twins, one of the biggest refrains is what we like to call cheap Paulettes. The Paulette family's been owners for the last 40 years. And going back a couple of seasons, the Twins broke a playoff win drought, I should say. They were 0-18 in consecutive playoff games, longest streak in pro sports. And then in 2023, they won. They made it, right? They were a couple of wins away from, making it big. And unfortunately, the Pohlad family did cut payroll from a franchise record about 160 million in 2023 to a hard 130 million cap last season. And so basically for all of 2024, the only notable addition was Carlos Santana. He was great, but he was also 38 years old, right? And it was a little bit of a reclamation project after a few down years. At the deadline, they desperately needed some pitching after losing a ton of guys to injuries. And there just wasn't the green light to spend any money. The only guy they picked up at the deadline last season was Trevor Richards, which it didn't go well, right? Like I think he pitched in 8 games. Uh, our local announcer talked about him having, 3 pitches, a fastball, a changeup, and a wild pitch, and didn't go well. The payroll constraints continued into the 2025 offseason. You spoke to it, right? Like not a lot of big moves. Made a couple of signings, but not big names, right? It's Harrison Bader, it's Danny Colomb, and the promise that fans have held on to for the last several months is the fact that the Polettes put the team up for sale several months ago, and all signs were pointing towards the Ishbia brothers buying the team. From everything that we had heard, it was pretty close to a done deal. And then over the past few days, reporting actually came out that they've backed out. They've increased their minority stake in the Chicago White Sox. And supposedly there's still some additional suitors out there. But it's tough to say. The Polad family has not spent on this team really for the entirety of their ownership. And that's the thing that the fans have been hanging on to is, will we get some new owners in here? Will we get some owners in here that will allow the team to spend commensurate with the market size, right? Minnesota's a solidly mid-market team, I think 16th in media market, but they've been sitting in like the bottom third of payroll. And so entering this season, the theory was they're basically capped out. And all season there were talks about, are they actually going to have to unload guys just to be able to fill the couple of holes that they've had? So there were talks about trading Chris Paddock. There were talks about trading Christian Vasquez, maybe Willie Castro. Ultimately, those things didn't come to pass. And that may have been because there were thoughts of ownership changing hands and the Polleds not having to write those paychecks. But now it's really anybody's guess. And I think that that's going to cast a little bit of cloud on this season. Thinking about some of those moves that they made. So Harrison Bader, Byron Buxton is an incredible player in center field. When he's healthy, that's a big asterisk to be clear. When he's healthy, he's a 6'4" guy. He's somebody that could be in the MVP discussion if he could play 150 games. But he's only played 100 games twice, I think, in his entire career, and he's 31 years old now. So Harrison Bader's going to be his backup, probably going to be getting a lot of time in left field. I don't love his bat in left field, right? I think he could be a gold glove defender out there, but if he's going to put up a 740 OPS, that really just doesn't play in left. So I'm a little nervous about that. Danny Colomb, he's great lefty. He played for the Twins a few years ago, was nails for the Orioles the last couple of seasons. He had added a cutter, and that's really worked well for him. Excited to see what he brings to the bullpen. Bullpen's projected to be the best in baseball this season, which is great. And then aside from that, the only other move that we made was Ty France, which, let's be honest, Ty France has looked a little bit cooked for the last couple of years. His bat is basically average, but he's a butcher on defense. And manager Rocco Baldelli has basically said he's going to be the everyday first baseman. So, with that, with a couple of trades that you spoke about, I'm not sure. There's not any clear holes on this lineup. Good pitching, decent hitting, incredible prospects on the way. But I personally would feel a lot better had there been that payroll flexibility to maybe sign a big bat to complement Byron Buxton, Carlos Correa, Royce Lewis, or add another frontline pitcher to go with the top trio of Pablo Lopez, Bailey Ober, Joe Ryan. But here we are. I think we're going to have to see what the season holds, and if another owner for the team ends up being announced over the next month or two.
No, for sure. There's some interesting, kind of tidbits with the Twins and Byron Buxton, right? So we just saw that the Angels are moving Mike Trout to a corner. They're moving him to right field. I sometimes wonder if the Twins will be better suited to move Buxton to a corner. And with picking up a guy like Bader, we know is a tremendous glove in center. He's not going to hit, worth a lick, but he's going to be able to go out there and field the ball. And if it would almost be better served to move Byron out of center, almost to protect him from himself, because we know that he's going to give it all, right? So we're not, questioning his passion and his love and his drive, but he sometimes can take it a little further than he's physically capable of enduring for the course of a season. So if the question to you is that something that could potentially be in the conversation for this upcoming season, having a guy like Bader? I know a couple of years ago they had Michael A. Taylor playing every day in center field and only DH'd Buxton, and he still got hurt. So is it something where moving him to a corner could allow him to kind of fix some of those health concerns?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think it sure could. I think that at the end of the day, if you're going to have both Bader and Buxton playing pretty much every day, it probably makes sense. At this point, I think Bader still has the wheels to cover center, and at target field, left field is pretty expansive. And so I think you want somebody that's got great range and a decent arm out there. And I think both Bader and Buxton could do that. I think there's a lot to be said for Buxton potentially moving down the defensive spectrum just a little bit, to your point, to keep him healthy, right? Because his bat plays, and his bat certainly plays better in left field than Harrison Bader's does, because he's a guy that can put up a 900 OPS if he's right. And I mean, that's going to play anywhere on the diamond, right, or anywhere in the field. And I think that Buxton is such a key to success for this team, right? Because it's a little bit of a tale of stars and scrubs. Not as much as you might see with like the Cleveland Guardians, for example. But when you've got 3 MVP caliber guys, and then you've got a bunch of other guys that are good, but maybe inconsistent or untested. I think there's a lot to be said for if you can do anything to keep Buxton healthy. The tough part is the team has tried to do that several different ways over the past handful of seasons, and unfortunately, some of the things that they've tried haven't really worked. Right? They've had him play a lot more shallow to allow him to range back. They have, to your point, DH'd him for really the entirety of the 2023 season. And at the end of the day, he does still get hurt a lot. And that's one of his calling cards. If I'm the manager, I'm probably going to do exactly what you said and put Buxton in left. Rocco Baldelli has said that Harrison Bader is going to be the left fielder at least a lot of the time. So I think it's tough to predict exactly what that's going to look like, but I think it's a great idea.
About Buxton, granted, he's a talented outfielder when he's healthy, but when they gave him that extension after being injured on and off, I kind of like scratched my head a little bit. I'm like, they just gave a guy that's consistently injured over $100 million. Why? What was the thought process behind? Like, this is almost as bad as, not the same thing, but the next one that compares to it is when the Yankees signed Aaron Hicks for 7 years at $70 million. Like, so
Yeah.
that's really the only question I have about it. Like, as a Yankees fan, like, can you explain like what the thought process was?
Yeah, absolutely. So here's the deal with that. The Byron Buxton contract is such an interesting one to me, because if you could write him in pen into the lineup for 150 games, I bet you money he would be a 6 WAR guy for you. And if you think about the value of a win in
Mm-hmm.
2025, right, I think it's about $8.5 million. So if he's right, he might be a $45 million player, right? Like, he's up there probably just a notch below Aaron Judge, Bobby Witt, Shohei, guys like that, right? And it's a big step down, but
Yeah.
he's still in the conversation with them.
For sure.
And I think the $15 million AAV that he got kind of bakes in some of that injury history and the expectation that you're going to get a half a season, 100 games, 120 games if you're really lucky about it. And at $15 million a year, you're really paying him to be maybe a 2 WAR guy, right? An everyday regular that can put up a little bit more, flash a bit when he's healthy. And so if you look at last year, right, 102 games, he put up, I think, 3.6 BWAR on the season. So like actual value, you're talking about 28, $29 million, somewhere in that camp. So I think it's a good investment, right? Because they're not going to sign with their payroll constraints. They're not going to sign a guy that can put up that level and stay healthy, because it's going to be 40% of their budget, right? 30% of their budget. It's just not tenable. And so I think the key for them is making sure that they have a really rock solid backup plan in center field, so that when Byron is injured, not if he's injured, when he is injured,
Yeah,
that they don't
absolutely.
have a big drop off. And, Harrison Bader, he's kind of a big drop off, right? But if he's out there with gold glove caliber defense, and if he can put up even a 700 OPS, it's fine. Like, you're not going to be excited about it, but the bottom's not going to drop out entirely. You spoke about Michael A. Taylor a couple seasons ago, and same thing, right? Like, Michael A. Taylor, he hit I think 20 home runs, hit 250, stole some bases, acquitted himself well on defense, and like that works. It's just you got to look at two guys playing one position.
Yeah, and I will say this. So I'm originally from Rhode Island, so I grew up watching Rocco play for the Rays and everything. So if there's anyone that knows how to manage injuries and get his guys to play through it, it's definitely him, considering what he went through in his career and battled through it. So you're in good hands with Rocco knows what he's doing.
For sure. Yeah.
You don't get
And I don't
hired
know
at
if you've heard.
37 years old to be a he's 3 years older than me, right? So when he got hired, I'm like, what am I doing wrong with my life?
I mean,
I was like,
I
this
think that
dude's
just
3 years
means
older than me, and he's the manager of a major league team. I was like, okay.
sure. I mean, that just means anything's possible, right, David?
Yeah,
You got
this is true.
So
That's
next
it.
Yankee skipper, it's gonna be great.
Yeah, no, I don't. No, I'm good. I'll let Boone do that job.
Yeah, fair enough.
I'll just sit around and talk about it doing this. So
That's it. It's an easier job.
sometimes
Sitting around and talking about Boone than actually being in his shoes is a much easier job.
Well, until you put it out on the internet and all the defenders of Boone come at you throwing spears like, no, leave him alone, you're wrong. Stop talking trash about our manager. Please.
That's funny. We do not have that problem in Minnesota because fans do tend to just crap on whoever the manager is 100% of the time. So to be clear,
Interesting.
Minnesota fans also crapped on Joe Mauer, first ballot Hall of Famer. So
Yeah.
it's a weird fan base. Love
Fun
to be
times,
one,
fun times.
but it's a weird base.
Must be the cold air.
I think so.
All right. So as we kind of look into this season, there's a lot of teams with injury concerns, but the Twins also have that. We mentioned and alluded to Buxton kind of always being an injury concern, but you also have Joey Ryan, Brock Stewart, and Emmanuel Rodriguez on the MLB.com injury report. Who else could potentially be someone of injury concern, or which one of these guys kind of stands out the most to you?
Jeremy, how much time you have? Because here's the deal. So last season, right? I think one of the things that was really tough for the Twins is they ended up losing about 1,800 service days on the injured list, and that was top 5 in baseball. And looking at some of the rest of the AL Central, they lost about 50 to 60% more days on the IL compared to the Guardians, compared to the Royals. They had twice as many days lost as the Tigers. It's a tough way to live. And at the end of the day, everybody's pretty healthy right now. And that's the good news, right? But thinking about the guys that have lost a lot of time historically, so Carlos Correa has been injured for significant parts of the last 2 seasons with plantar fasciitis. He's undergone some pretty significant changes to his training routine, the shoes that he's using, orthotics, like all these different things to try to keep that healthy. But he only played about half the season last year. Byron Buxton played 102 games. Royce Lewis, right? Young slugger, MVP potential if he can put it all together and stay on the field. He lost about half the season last year, and injuries have been the story of his career all throughout. Brock Stewart is lightning on the mound and has been injured basically the entirety of his career. When he's healthy, he's great, right? Like he'll strike out 13, 14 guys per 9, ERA in the 2s. And he is a guy that you can put out there in the 8th inning, 9th inning, and be incredible. But beyond that, to your point, yeah, Joe Ryan, he's been injured each of the last 2 seasons, and he's somebody that's a strong number 2 pitcher when he's healthy. He went down last August with a teres major strain, lost about 2 months, and that coincided with basically the end of the Twins season, right? That free fall where they went 12 and 27 down the stretch. And so it's less about any one guy that's concerning right now, and it's more about, hey, there's 8 guys that the other shoe could drop at any moment, and what will that mean for the 2025 Twins? And I think that's something that ultimately is going to define what this next season looks like. Is if 5, 6 of those guys are healthy for the bulk of the season, I think it's going to be a good season for them. But if this year is like last year and they end up having 1,500 days, 1,800 days on the IL, it's going to be a tougher thing. I think if I were to pinpoint the one that would be most concerning for me, though, it is Royce Lewis because, you know, he looks like a future Hall of Famer. That's a hot take for sure, but I'm putting that on record because he mashes. He's young, he's 25 years old. He was, first overall prospect. His career to this point, he's torn his ACL in 2 consecutive seasons. He's had soft tissue issues. He hurt himself on opening day last season after hitting a home run in his first at bat.
Yep.
Next time up, got injured. So for me, the season's going to rest with him.
So you just spoke about Royce Lewis. So that kind of leads me into the next point here with the X factor. So in my, preparation for this series, Royce Lewis was the guy that I kind of pegged as the X factor for the Twins' success in 2025. As you said, his ability and his talent is, second to none, a top prospect, in the Twins organization at some point, but he's constantly injured. If he can find a way to be healthy for 130, 35, 40 games, even, the sky is really the limit for him. Who do you think is going to be the X factor for the Twins in 2025? And kind of what does that look like in terms of success?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's two guys that I really pin that X factor label on. One of them is Royce Lewis because I think he's a key, right? Like we've talked about that a little bit. And I think that it's health, and I think that it's also how does he make adjustments in real time? So for the first 2.5 seasons that he had flashes in the majors, he would be gone for months at a time. He would come back, he would hit a bunch of home runs, hit 300, look like the guy. And this past season he made a comment, a really unfortunate comment in hindsight, kind of mid-June, right before going out on injury, and he said, one of the things about me is I don't really do the whole slump thing. Not a thing you want to say. Got injured, came back, went on a slump for about 2 months down the stretch. Also coincided with the Twins collapsing. And so he said over the past couple of months here that a big part of it was he wore down. He got tired. It was his first time making it to the end of a season in several years. And so he's spoken about his conditioning. He's spoken about trying to get back to his athletic roots, focusing on flexibility rather than just lifting. And so I'm curious to see what that looks like for him. But health, if he's able to adjust, he's obviously a huge piece for the team. The other that I would say is an X factor for me is closer Yuan Duran. So Duran is gas, right? Like set major league records a couple of seasons ago, 104.8 miles an hour on his heater, has a nasty splinker. He set a record for being the only guy to throw an off-speed pitch 100 miles an hour, which like just chew on that for a second, right? And last season
Crazy stat.
started the year, it's a crazy stat, right? Elite velocity. His curveball might actually be his best pitch, and that's wild when you're talking about a guy that can throw 105. So entering last season, he was on the shelf for a little bit early in the year, got a late start, injured in camp, ended up having an oblique injury, missed maybe a month or so, came back, and his velo was down about 2 ticks on all of his pitches. So, I mean, throwing 102, that's still fine, to be clear. But if he can get right, if he can get to a place where he's able to just unleash in the back of the bullpen, that's a scary bullpen. It's 6, 7, 8 guys deep of legit setup caliber or better arms. And, it could legitimately be the best bullpen in baseball and should be. So I think if he's right, they have a deadly 1, 2, 3, 4 punch with Yohan Duran, Griffin Jacks. We talked a little bit about Brock Stewart and then also Cole Sands, kind of a former failed starter turned out of nowhere elite setup guy. So I think Duran's right. That bullpen's going to be a force.
And who was the other guy? In terms of, for me, there was another guy in this lineup that I also feel is a potential X factor, and that's Carlos Correa. And similar to the Royce Lewis talk, similar to the Byron Buxton talk, if Correa is healthy, this is a guy who can absolutely be lineup transforming. And we saw it during his time in Houston. We saw it when he's healthy in Minnesota, what he's capable of doing in a big way for a lineup. I also think that he's an X factor in terms of what the Twins do decide to do with their payroll. He did get signed to that, massive contract, opted out, came back, got just as big a deal. And so it's a question to me as far as the future of the organization, how long they stay with Carlos in a Twins uniform.
Yeah, absolutely. He's got a full no trade clause. And so one thing that I know about Carlos Correa is he wants to win. He is incredibly competitive. And there's a little bit of a joke in Twins territory that he's the assistant GM. And he is so involved. Last year at the trade deadline, he provided ownership in the front office a list of guys that he had curated as here are targets that would fit well with our team concept, guys that would fix holes in our lineup, players that we should target on the pitching side of things. Ultimately, it didn't go anywhere. But I think a happy, healthy Carlos Correa makes the team better, especially considering how many young guys are trying to break their way into the core. And he is somebody that puts in the work. He is somebody that is coaching everybody around him. And one thing that's a little bit unique to this year. So Rocco Baldelli spoke to him, David. He's been a player's manager for the past several years, and in this spring training, he's spoken about needing to be just a little bit more of a taskmaster, changing some things up from a team drills standpoint. And so Carlos Correa is one of the driving forces behind this. He's talked about this is something our team needs after the collapse down the stretch last year. And so I think that if he is healthy, he is going to be driving the team forward. He's going to be a mentor to the young players. And I think as goes Carlos Correa, so go the Minnesota Twins. But I do think that if the team is not sold, and if the Pohlads retain ownership to the, let's say, trade deadline, and if it turns into a fire sale of we've got to cut payroll, I think there would be a real world situation where Carlos Correa might say, you know what, that's actually enough for me. I would like to go to somebody that is interested in building a winner. And I think that would be a really, really tough thing for this fan base. I think it would be a really, really tough thing for this team. And I think it would probably signify a soft rebuild, which would be incredibly unfortunate because there's no reason to be in this place at this point, right? They've got a young core, they have a good farm system, they've got a bunch of guys that are poised to contribute in meaningful ways. It's just a matter of, yeah, is he healthy? Is he happy? And what's the team actually interested in investing in?
No,
Well,
for sure.
I got a little bit of a theory about why he's going through this little bit of a rough patch. This is what happens when you bang trash cans to win baseball games.
I knew that one was coming.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now on a serious note, you said Correa, pretty much like the assistant GM of the team. How come the Twins didn't try to reunite him and Alex Bregman? I don't know what the Twins' payroll flexibility even looks like. I mean, the daily, us as Yankees fans, we were even scratching. We couldn't find out 120 million with three opt outs to give this dude to put him at third base and plug a hole. So I don't know what your third base situation is looking like going into this season, but Alex Bregman on any team is an upgrade no matter where you put him. So were the Twins even considering talking to Bregman and making an offer, or did Correa even pick up the phone and call him hey dude, do you want to come here with me and try to redo what we did in Houston without the trash cans?
Yeah. Man, I would be shocked if the Twins even made a call to his camp. And I think going into this offseason, right, there was perceived to be the soft mandate to potentially need to cut $10 million in payroll from where the team ended in 2024. And they've got a number of young players entering arbitration for the first time. Pablo Lopez is getting expensive in the first year of his extension that he signed.
Mm-hmm.
And going into this season, they were set with about $142 million on the books. Last season, they ended the season at about 130, and the sense was they wanted to start this season where they ended last season. And so thinking about where do you find that money for Bregman,
Yeah.
I think you would have to gut the team, and I think it would cause you to make some pretty untenable decisions. Now, I think if things would have ended up just a little bit differently with the Ishbia brothers, and if the team would have announced a sale, say, a month ago, it might be a different situation, because if they're not having to pay the checks and new owners are coming in saying, hey, we're fine at 160, we're fine at 170, we're fine at 180, I think he would be an incredible fit, right? Good veteran presence. There's some under the hood metrics that are a little bit concerning, just from an aging curve standpoint, but he's not going to fall off a cliff this season, right? Like, will he 2 years, 3 years, 4 years from now? Maybe. Tough to say. Swing speed tends to decrease when a player hits 31. Defensive metrics are taking a small step backwards, but would I love to have him? Absolutely. Back when it looked like the Ishbias were going to be taking over the team, there were rumors about the Twins trying to trade the Padres for Dylan Cease. And, he doesn't carry a $40 million payroll, but still would carry
Not
real
yet.
world added expenses. Yeah, not yet. And so it's just a tough place to be when you've got ownership that is more interested in the bottom line than putting a winning product on the field.
So why are the owners trying to sell the team? Like everything, like the biggest news right now is what's going on with the Padres and that whole mess. I had no idea the Twins were even on the selling block. Why are the owners trying to sell the team?
Yeah. So the Pohlads have owned the team for like 42 seasons now, and they bought the team for, I think it was $40 million.
That's it.
They're now in yeah, yeah, wild, right? And now Forbes projects them to be worth about $1.5 billion. So great investment. But the family's on its third generation of ownership now, and there are a number of different Pohlads that have, small stakes in the team, and most of them have their actual business interests that they're running day to day. The Pohlad family is really leveraged in commercial real estate space in downtown Minneapolis and elsewhere, and a little bit of a tough time post-pandemic to be that leveraged in commercial real estate. And so the sense is that they're a little bit cash poor, although they've got, obviously the net worth to cover whatever they want to do. And so the sense is they want to get out of it, recoup some cash, have that cash that allows them to focus on their other business interests, and ultimately pay out everybody that has their stake. And so it was close to being a done deal until it wasn't. But I think with this generation of the team, they've never given a sense of being really committed to winning. It's been just part of their portfolio. And if it wins, great. But more importantly, what does the bottom line look like?
Right.
And unfortunately, there have been kind of all throughout the team, even in the business side of the team, there have been some really unfortunate tone deaf comments over the past several years talking about, well, if only the fans would come out, we might be able to have a little bit more payroll. But it's a chicken and egg situation, right? Because if you're putting a really quality product on the field, fans show up. So it's an interesting time, to be clear.
If you want fans to show up, don't build an open air stadium where it's -20 until May. Like, I will never understand that concept. Like, put a roof on the damn thing.
Especially when you think about the Metrodome and how raucous that place was. At the end of its
Exactly. Thank you. And to your point, Eric, Carlos Correa's contract takes up 13% of the budget, and you guys need to cut 10 million. I found where you can cut 10 million. Christian Vasquez, right there, $10 million for this year. Problem solved. Busy 10 mil. 34-year-old catcher. Bye.
Yeah, no, for sure. There's definitely some contracts the team could get out from under. Christian Vasquez is certainly one of them, and there have been endless rumors of the Twins trying to shop him to any number of different teams, including the Padres, as potentially for part of Dylan Cease. But the tricky part is Christian Vasquez is not a $10 million player at age 34. He probably wasn't a $10 million player at age 32, but the Twins needed a catcher, and he was the best one on the market. And so, unfortunately, I think the Twins were going to need to absorb maybe $7 or $8 million of his $10 million contract just to get out from under it. And then at that point, you still need to sign a backup catcher. So if you're turning around and spending that $2 or $3 million on some other random guy, you're right back where you started. And at least Vasquez is good defensively, good framer. Pitchers like throwing to him, and he is a veteran presence that I think the younger guys look up to.
And speaking of kind of those younger guys, MLB.com has Walker Jenkins as the top prospect for the Minnesota Twins. What can you kind of tell us about him, and if there's any other prospects that are kind of on your radar?
Yeah, absolutely. Walker Jenkins is the guy. So, he was drafted in the 2023 draft, fifth overall, probably would have been first overall in most draft seasons. He's incredibly polished. So at 19 years old, he made AA, first full season out of high school, right? Like, that's wild.
That's insane.
And he's hit for a little bit of power. He's got raw power. There's thoughts that it might take another year or two for that to really turn into good game power. Good defensively. He might stick in center field. If not, he may move down the defensive spectrum a little bit. But he's probably going to start this year at AA. I would be shocked if he doesn't make it to AAA by mid-season. And depending on how things go, like, he could be a September call-up this year. He is somebody that has legitimate MVP future potential. And I think his downside would be if he doesn't develop enough game power, maybe he's going to be a good everyday regular as opposed to a perennial all-star. But, like, that's an okay place to be. And so he's a dude. Other guys that I'm excited about. So Emmanuel Rodriguez, he's an outfielder, plays center, may eventually move to one of the corners. He is just about ready. Finished last season at AAA, had some injuries, injured his hand a few different times, and he may have a minor injury. I think he sprained his ankle like a couple of days ago, so he could be a little bit delayed going into this season. But depending on how things shake out with Harrison Bader, if he looks a little bit cooked, if he's lost a step, Emmanuel Rodriguez could step in and take over. And he's somebody that has elite plate discipline, potentially bordering on passivity, but unsure if it's going to go that far or not. He's got great power, like 30 homer power, speed. He might be a 20, 25, 30 steal kind of guy. Decent arm, pretty complete. The only question is, can he get just maybe a little bit more aggressive at the plate? And then the other guy that I would talk about is Luke Keeschel. He's mid-40s on the global top 100 prospect lists. He's somebody that can play all over. Probably going to be a second base, maybe third base, outfield. Can do a little bit of everything. Pretty polished approach, drafted out of college. He's basically ready. And so the first sign of needing somebody almost anywhere on the diamond, short of, I don't know that he would necessarily get much play at like first base, and he's not a shortstop. But outside of that, he'll probably be the first call up somewhere else. So those are the guys I'm excited about.
Well, the case with Rodriguez, he might get called up because Harrison Bader is not a matter of if he gets injured, it's when he gets injured because he's got flat feet.
This is true.
Just ask us Yankees fans how that panned out.
Yeah, not great. Not great.
Guy couldn't walk.
Yeah.
And ended up rehabbing in the postseason with like 3 other guys. Crazy.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, it is. I would not be shocked to see that swap made at some point. So I think a lot depends on what does the defense look like? Can he run? And is he hitting? Even a little bit.
Especially considering the fact that, Buxton is often injured, Bader's often injured. So there very well could be a time relatively quickly in the season where Rodriguez is the everyday center fielder for Minnesota.
Bader will cut himself shaving and be out for 3 months. So there's that.
Like spoken like a Twins fan. I can hardly wait.
Now, with this series, we always like to get a bold prospect for each team. So, Eric, what is your bold prospect for the Minnesota Twins?
Prediction.
Yeah. We've talked a lot about ownership changes. That's going to be my bold prediction. I think that a sale of the team is going to go through. I think that the new owners, whoever they might be, will give the green light to spend. And my prediction is that at the trade deadline, the Twins are going to swing big for an impact player. That's going to be different than the past few trade deadlines. And I'm not sure if it's going to end up being a frontline pitcher because they are pretty stacked there, or if it's going to be an impact bat. But I think that they're going to swing big.
So it's funny because in my preparation for this, I said the opposite. I think that Minnesota is going to sell a couple of pieces at the deadline, being Pablo Lopez and Carlos Correa. So I'm going in the opposite direction and saying that that's going to be my bold prediction for the Twins this year.
But where does
Well,
Correa go?
I don't know, but I didn't think that far through, Dave. It just
Let's throw it around. Where do you two think
so
he's going?
to be honest, to be completely honest with you, I think he comes to New York. I think that he's going to be on the Yankees
Are you
and
serious?
yes, playing third base. Yeah, I would absolutely. I would
Woo-hoo!
love Correa in the Bronx. I've
That's a
been
hot
on
take right there.
I've been on Correa since he got drafted out of Puerto Rico. I have wanted him on the Yankees forever. So for me, plug him in at third base. We saw him be able to do it in the WBC a few years ago for Team Puerto Rico. So, yeah, I would 100%. To
And the
me, it's
Yankees got the
A-Rod all over.
prospects to make that move happen too. But he is on the wrong side. He is 30 years old, so I mean, he'd probably get a little bit of a discounted rate. Probably be able to get away with George Lombard Jr. and a couple of
No, I don't
pitchers
think he's
and
getting
call
moved.
it a day.
I don't think Lombard's getting moved. But, yeah, that to me is where I would love to see Correa go. But there's a number of teams that could use him at shortstop, at third. I mean, the guy is a potential MVP caliber player when healthy.
Yeah, Eric.
he is for sure. Although, Jeremy, I got to tell you, I like my prediction better than I like your prediction.
I bet you do. Yeah. Now, as we kind of look towards the organization, what do you think is the biggest question facing the organization in 2025?
We've talked about health a lot. I don't want to dig back into that one, but for me, one of the big question marks is, can at least one or two of their young players take a step forward? So they've got a handful of guys that have flashed great skills for limited periods of time, but have been somewhat inconsistent. They've got guys like Edward Julian, who is going to be part of the second base battle in this spring. He's somebody that has he's shown himself capable of being an elite major league hitter.
For sure.
From a plate discipline standpoint, he's got a little bit of power, has the ability to probably hit 300. Last season was a mess for him. He was getting under way too many balls, taking way too many called third strikes, pretty much anywhere in the zone other than middle up. Can he take a step forward and cement a regular everyday job? Jose Miranda is sort of in that same camp. He's dealt with injuries over the past few seasons. This past year, he set a record for most consecutive plate appearances with getting hit, right? 12 at-bats in a row. And he is somebody that has dealt with back issues, and those back issues have made him look overmatched even at AAA. But when he's healthy, he rakes, puts up a 880, 900 OPS, and is somebody that's capable of taking first base or third base and running with it. Brooks Lee got a small taste of the majors last season, probably a year too soon, but he's somebody that can play anywhere on the diamond. And if he's ready, he projects to have elite contact skills. He's somebody that's got good leather in really any infield position. And even guys like Matt Wallner. So last year he was sent back down to AAA because his swing was a mess. He was striking out. I think he struck out 50% of the time over his first 30 plate appearances. Got a swing right, came up, raked, and even guys like Trevor Larnach, another outfielder, big burly guy, okay average, good power, okay fielder. If two of those guys show that they're capable of being everyday players, it's going to be a good season. If all four of those guys take a step back or just kind of tread water, I think that's going to be a little bit tougher. And I think some of the flaws in the lineup construction will be a little bit more apparent when you also have weak hitters like Christian Vasquez, like Ty France, and like
Harrison
Harrison
Bader.
Bader, right? Like you you can't absorb 5 or 6 guys that can't hit. So
No, for
we'll have
sure.
to see how
Yeah,
that
I mean,
goes.
when it comes to the Twins, they have a lot of interesting guys that are on that roster. I really do like Edouard Julien. I think that he could be another Luis Ariz type, where he could truly be, an impactful, consistent hitter, day in and day out in that order, and maybe not, he'll probably provide more power than what an Ariz would do, but that type of player. Getting consistent at bats. His plate discipline is, as you said, almost passive, to the point at the plate where if he can get a little bit more aggressive in the inside of the strike zone, obviously we don't want that expansion, but if he can get inside that strike zone and be aggressive at that point, this could be a guy that is a perennial all-star for the Twins.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
So now, kind of flipping sides on that, what is the biggest frustration for Twins fans when it comes to this team and the organization?
I think we've talked about a couple of different pieces so far, right? Like payroll constraints are certainly one of the big ones that goes back to ownership. I think another frustration is stopping one move shy of making a really truly complete team. We've seen that a few seasons in a row, and Rocco Baldelli loves to platoon. And I think platooning, there's a lot of science behind it, right? The data says that when you're optimizing matchups, you're going to get the best possible results most of the time. But if you don't have great guys that you can actually platoon, sometimes it's an exercise in futility. So last season, for example, Manny Margot was an offseason signing. He set a record for the most consecutive hitless pinch hit appearances at 0 and 30. Stop platooning the guy. It's
Yeah.
not going to work out. And so when you make those moves and you can say before you even watch the at bat, this is not going to go well, that's a problem. And looking at the roster construction for this season, it's possible that there's going to be more of that. So I think it's going to be interesting to see.
No, definitely. Minnesota has the ability to really be able to be a top caliber team, especially in that American League Central division. But there are those factors of whether they're trying to be too cute with the platooning and the analytical approach, and whether or not they're trying to be too cute with getting guys with these fringe skill sets like a Harrison Bader that has elite defensive ability when he's healthy, but sometimes can't hit his weight, let alone hitting over 300. So it's going to be an interesting season for sure with Minnesota. When we kind of look at the offense for this team, how would you grade out the offense for Minnesota heading into 2025?
I'm going to give it a solid C. And that's the place where I see the widest range of outcomes over the course of this season. We could finish 2025, look back and say, it was actually okay, right? Like solid B plus. Or we could finish the season and say, that was a train wreck. They were 28th out of 30 teams in hitters OPS. And I wouldn't be surprised either way. I think so much of it is going to come down to that health piece, and so much of it is going to come down to can guys take a step forward. If they can get even the 50th percentile outcome of their entire lineup, it's going to be fine, right? Like they'll be middle of the pack in the American League, but I think their pitching will be what will ultimately carry them. They have enough high-end prospects in the upper minors that I think they can withstand some injuries, which is maybe a little bit different than seasons past. But outside of those top, 3 hitters, there's just not a lot of other guys that are truly impact bats.
So then that perfectly segues into how would you grade out the pitching?
Pitching, I feel great about. I would say the pitching as it stands today is probably an A minus. So we've talked about the bullpen a little bit. It's by Zips projected to be the best bullpen in baseball, and it's not particularly close. That prediction was before they added Danny Colom, and they also have some guys in the high minors that could step in and contribute. I would not be shocked if by mid-season the entire bullpen is set up caliber arms. And I think that creates some really interesting capabilities and possibilities when it comes to your game plans, right? If you can really allow your starting pitchers to have two great runs through the rotation and then turn it over to a lights out bullpen, um, that gets pretty interesting when you're looking at your fourth and fifth starters. And when you look at your rotation, so Pablo Lopez, he's great. He might be a half a step shy of an ace, but he's nails. He's incredibly cerebral, gets great results, is super prepared, is thoughtful, mentors the younger guys, and he's a guy that in a playoff game, I want him out there on game one. Bailey Ober, Joe Ryan have both looked like frontline guys when healthy. And, I mentioned Joe Ryan has lost stretches of each of the last two seasons, but he's somebody, all three of those guys are actually projected to be top 40 pitchers in baseball by Zips projections. And so, like, that's great, right? Having three guys that are that good, I'd put him up against just about anybody aside from like the Dodgers, but nobody's going to compete against the Dodgers from a pitching standpoint. And more interestingly, looking at the pitching depth at the high minors, they have 7 or 8 guys that project to be mid rotation arms or better and are ready now. And so I actually think that they'll have some pieces that they can use to trade at the deadline if there's payroll space to allow for that. But I would be shocked if by the end of the season, they don't have a top 5 starting pitcher ERA in baseball and, a top 3 relief pitcher ERA in baseball. And, I think they're going to be incredible.
No, for sure. There is a lot to be excited about, especially with that bullpen, like you mentioned. Now, as we kind of wind things down here, we look at the divisional ranking predictions, and with the ranking predictions, Pacoda and Fangraphs have the Twins both coming in first place. Pacoda has you guys winning 86 games, and Fangraphs has it at 83. Really a mediocre division according to Fangraphs. Where do you see the win total for the Minnesota Twins, and where do they land in the division in your mind?
Yeah. This is the time of year to be an eternal optimist. And so I'm going to say the Twins are going to put up 88 wins this season. I think that that's realistic. I think it's very achievable. Um, I do think that it doesn't even require that much to break right for the team in order to achieve that kind of result. I think if the pitching generally does what it's supposed to, and if the hitters don't fall off a cliff, or if we don't miss half of a season from all of Correa, Buxton, and Royce Lewis again, yeah, I think 88 wins is real.
Yeah. Uh, I think that for Minnesota and for that whole division outside of the White Sox, I think that it is so interchangeable right now. I think that there's so much parity between that division that any breakout season from a young player that's not expected, a fully healthy year from, the kind of major superstar players on any one of the teams in that division is going to be what kind of breaks the division for any one of those 4 squads outside of the White Sox. So definitely can see an 88 win team out of Minnesota for sure. Now, as we kind of bring it to a close and use the title of this series, what is the state of the franchise for the Minnesota Twins in your mind?
Hmm. Well, I think the Twins are in transition just a little bit because of the ownership situation being in flux. But I think that their window of contention is open. And I think there's no reason whatsoever that they shouldn't be in contention for winning the division at a minimum for the next 3, 4 seasons. They have everybody locked up. Correa, Buxton, Pablo Lopez. They've got a few more seasons of all of them. The young core, Most of them just started their first year of arbitration eligibility this year. So they're locked up for, a couple more seasons as well. And with that wave of young prospects, I think the only question is, will that window of contention remain open? Because there's the payroll to not have to get rid of some of the guys as their key contributors. And so, assuming ownership changes and getting payroll to a place where it is commensurate with media market size, I think they're in a good place for the next 5-6 seasons.
For sure. Yeah. I think that where they are is a team that's going to be battling for a wild card spot. And I think that for this team, like you said, it's going to be having to make sure some of those young players kind of take those next steps in their progression, keeping their star players healthy. And that's going to kind of be the way that this team paces out. New ownership, as you said, kind of bringing the payroll to market value is going to be something that I think is going to be very important for the sustainability of this franchise long term. When the Twins are good, it typically means baseball as a whole is good. So it's definitely something to kind of pay attention to when it comes to how the central division, to me, when it's cooking, then the rest of the league is even better. So it's definitely going to be an interesting season to see how it all shakes out. Now, we want to thank you for joining us, Eric. Let everybody know where they can find you for more Twins content.
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate that. So you can find mine and so much more great writing on twinsdaily.com. We usually have half a dozen stories a day from maybe 20 different writers, all taking different takes, analytics, all sorts of different things. Outside of that, I'm on Twitter and Blue Sky, Eric Blonigen. Not super active on either, but love to hang out. So check it out.
Absolutely. And we want to thank you for joining us for sure. As we kind of go through this progression, we have our Linktree shop down in the show notes below. It is where you can get all the latest, greatest from us here on the Baseball Banter broadcast. And you can get to our merchandise shop, sponsor links, shopping links, and our social media platforms, as well as the audio platforms that we are on. And we want to thank everybody for joining us here on the YouTube side of things. Make sure you leave a subscribe button hit, as well as the bell for post notifications. So every time we drop new content, you will be notified. And if you're on the audio side, make sure you leave a 5-star rating review, as it does help us continue to grow this channel. So once again, thank you, Eric, for joining us. This has been a fun conversation discussing the Minnesota Twins, and we will catch you on the next video.